We are here in the new Urban Agenda Corner with Dan Lewis from UN Habitat. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we know that for United Nations, resilience is very important. How can cities become more resilient?
Well, there are many ways. You can imagine the complexity of any city system anywhere in the world. Even the smallest town and village is a complex system itself. There are ways of improving the resilience or the capacity of different systems within a city to make them more resilient. There are ways of grouping together different systems, and then there's a more holistic way of looking at the city itself as a system. Excuse me for one moment. I got a bit of a sorry. Looking at the city itself as a holistic system. And this is the approach that UN Habitat takes, is that we've developed a universal model that applies to any city of any size in any part of the world, any culture, any economy, and any risk profile. And this universal model looks at all risks that the city faces. So whether they're economic risks or social risks or risks as a result of climate change or natural hazards, the idea of building resilience is one that looks at a whole systems approach and all hazards and all risk. So how do cities get started? Well, our experience is that the first step forward is to have a political commitment at the highest level in local government to making a city safer for its residents, to protecting the assets within the city, to protecting development gains that are made through the application of the new urban agenda or the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and to ensure continuity. And this is the big difference between a risk reduction agenda and a resilience agenda. It's the integration of continuity of flows, functions of government, flows of energy, flows of people and traffic and goods, and the things that actually are the functions of human settlements. And this principle of continuity is the fundamental basis behind the development of a resilience agenda in cities.
So you mentioned governments. What about the private sector? What's their role here?
Well, as stakeholders in urban development, as stakeholders in the functions and flows that take place within cities, the private sector is an integral element of any strategy to ensure a city is developed. You know, in general, we use a very general statistic that somewhere between 70 and 80% of all urban assets are actually owned by the private sector, including people like you and me, right? So for local government not to pay attention to the voice of people, you and me, of the corporate or private sector, but also for the semi-private sector that functions in many cities around the world. These are important stakeholders in determining the priorities and the direction within which a resilience-based urban development agenda is developed and implemented.
So we have mentioned now the private sector. What about the citizens? How can they be more involved in this implementation of resilience in cities?
Well, obviously it's a question that has different responses in different parts of the world, okay? Where citizens are empowered or enabled to engage directly with local government or to engage directly with other stakeholder groups, the obvious starting point is understanding what a resilient city looks like and what role you play or I play as an individual in making our city more resilient. So there are many different variations on engaging with government through school systems, education systems, obviously directly through local government, but also through consultations that are held by private sector in terms of development programming in cities around the world. And to engage at that level and ask the questions, ask the hard questions, demand the response that you want from the people you elect to represent you. And you don't need to do it alone. You will find there's solidarity in various different organizational structures, whether they're non-governmental structures, whether they're political structures, whether they're even neighborhood associations and communities in different parts of the world can find solidarity around these kinds of agendas and engage with the rest of the stakeholders to try and ensure that their agendas are met as well.
We are here in the Smart City Congress, so how do you think that we can combine the technology possibilities with the bottom-up approach? You were talking about citizens. How can we combine it? Here we see many companies.
Yeah, I mean, part of my challenge every time I come to the Smart Cities is to talk to the representatives of these exhibitions here and ask them the tough questions, you know? Is this technology transferable? Is it adaptable? Is it economical? How do we translate what you're doing in London to what needs to be done in Maputo in Mozambique, for example? And every year I am surprised at not just the interest but the commitment to finding ways of adapting and transforming the very high-level technology systems that you see here in this expo and you're hearing about in the Congress to make them applicable in other parts of the world where perhaps the infrastructure is not as advanced or the economies are not sufficient and these types of things. There's a commitment here, and it's an interesting observation in talking to many of the exhibitors and technological companies that are here in the Smart Cities.
Yes, so this Congress supports your work, and I want to thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.